2022. Actually, after the deadline, mainly because of the general plan process, you are also in the process of updating the general plan. So the housing element has to work kind of in tandem with the general plan. The city initiated the update in August. And 2022, we conducted some community workshops back in 2023, February and May, in order to obtain input from the residents and also from the Planning Commission as well. We sent the housing element to the state for its review in May. The initial review is a 90-day review. It took, and we were able to get comments back from the state in July. When we actually we submitted I correct myself. The housing element was put on a 30-day public review for residents to comment on back in May to June 2023. After that, in July, we sent it up to the state for the 90-day review, and we were able to get some comments back from them. And we have done another subsequent 60-day review. Typically, the housing element takes like several rounds of review with the state, and average is about anywhere between 3 to 5 rounds. After we've gotten the second round of review from the state back in December, we continue to engage the state in informal reviews and worked with the state, and the state was very generous with their time and was able to meet with us on a regular basis to work with us on all the remaining issues. And so as of now that we did receive a preliminary review matrix from the state that indicated that all the comments that they had with the housing element have already been satisfactorily resolved. And so with the adoption of the housing element, we fully expect the housing element will be certified by the state. When we presented the housing element back with the Planning Commission in August, it was recommended to the City Council for approval. Now, just kind of for the benefits of the residents who may not be as familiar with the housing element, there are some key elements, contents of the housing element that are regulated by state law. The needs assessment, we need to look at what are the current and projected needs of residents in terms of housing. We also need to look at constraints to housing development, particularly on governmental constraints, market constraints, and environmental constraints. After looking at the constraints, we also need to look at resources and opportunities the city may have in order to address its housing issues. Resources are primarily focused on the city's ability to accommodate future growth. What is the capacity for potential development in the future? We looked at the past effectiveness of programs that the city has been implementing, what works and what doesn't work, and then how the new housing element should be modified in order to improve its effectiveness. And finally, a new set of housing actions within 8 years during the planning period for the housing element, which is October 2021 to October 2029. So with the housing element content, I mentioned before that the state reviewed the housing element, and the state's review of the housing element is very rigorous and stringent. One key component of that review is how is the city able to meet its regional allocation for housing needs, RHNA. And that's also the reason why the city is doing the general plan too. In addition to long-term growth and development in the city, how is the city going to be able to meet the regional housing needs allocation, RHNA? The RHNA is a top-down process. It's determined by the state at the state level how much housing is needed over the next 8 years, and then it's allocated to the regions within the state, and each regional government, Southern California Association of Governments, representing the 6-county region in Southern California, is responsible for taking the regional allocation and provide that to and distribute that to each jurisdiction within its geography. And within the City of Commerce, we have a regional housing needs allocation of 247 units. The RHNA is a planning goal. We must demonstrate that based on land use policies and development standards that you have the ability to accommodate those units, but it's not a production obligation, as most jurisdictions do not function as developers. So what you need to do is to demonstrate you have the capacity but you're not obligated to build the units. It's up to the market, up to the private developers when the housing is being produced. The RHNA is
Do you mind
divided
repeating that? Sorry to interrupt you. Do you mind repeating that again? I just want a clear understanding of that last comment you made.
The regional housing needs allocation, the number of housing units that you're being allocated by the COG, South SCAG, is 247 units. It's divided into income categories, very low, low, moderate, above moderate income. Essentially, the state law requires that you demonstrate that you have the ability to accommodate that much growth within your city, based on your land use policies, based on your development regulations. However, the city has no control over actual development, so you're not obligated to make sure those units are going to be developed. You need to create an environment that encourage and facilitate housing to be developed, but you're not held responsible if housing doesn't develop in your city for market reasons. I'll give a very good example is that when the fourth cycle RHNA was developed, immediately after that, there was a collapse of the housing market and nothing got built. And so you cannot be held responsible for the market. And for that reason, as of now, state law still does not hold cities responsible for the actual production, but you are obligated to make sure that your land use policies provide that possibility.
Okay, thank you.
So in tandem with working on the general plan land use policy, the general plan general plan consultant is here with us tonight as well. We have identified potential for development in the city of RHNA based on what has already been approved. You can take credits for projects that's been approved. Projects that's been planned, such as Modelo's specific plan. You can also take credit for projected accessory dwelling units, which is not a very high trend in your community, but you do get to take credits for some units that may be developed based on historic development patterns in your community. We are also looking at some of the city-owned properties that, as we understand, that there have been discussions about housing on those city-owned properties. And in addition, we have also identified non-city-owned properties that are just market properties that are owned by private owners that has the potential for redevelopment in the future. So with all that, we have identified significant or sufficient capacity to demonstrate our ability to accommodate the regional housing needs allocation. But yet again, it's the demonstration of capacity, not construction, that the city is held responsible for. When we sent the city's housing element to the state for review, there are some key comments that we got from the state, mostly a technical comments on how would the city's new land use policy, the new mixed use designations, how would all that facilitate fair housing in the community, which when the state is looking for fair housing, they're focusing on, are you providing a variety of housing choices? Types of housing, prices of housing in various parts of the city. So because of the new general plan, we are able to provide, demonstrate to the state that the new general plan does offer that expand the opportunities for new types of housing and new locations for housing. They were also asking about development standards to facilitate housing development. Again, in conjunction with the general plan update, the city will be updating the zoning code to implement the general plan. It will have new development standards that will facilitate a variety of housing in the community, particularly related to objective design standards and also some zoning code amendments that the city will have to do in order to comply with different changes in state law. The state also emphasized on neighborhood improvements. The state understands that the city has its more commercial and industrial history, and then in order to provide for a variety of housing types, there needs to be economic development in the city and also neighborhood improvements. So the housing element actually connects with other elements of the general plan that talks about policies relating to economic development, environmental justice, and also neighborhood improvements. When the draft housing element was also put on public review, we also did receive some comments from the public, mainly from the Department of Toxic Substances Control. Really recommends new policies relating to connecting future projects that may fall into the oversight of the department, and make sure that on a case-by-case basis, city will evaluate any opportunities for remediation or improvements. Caltrans also recommends that the city do best support the reduction of vehicle use, access to transit, and best practices for environmental sustainability, not only in the housing element, but certainly in the general plan. So all of that, the city will be reviewing all these on a case-by-case basis. When construction happens, the city will comply with all these various regulations. So with that, I conclude my presentation. Our next steps is hopefully at the conclusion of tonight's public hearing, we will have an adopted housing element that we can move that forward to the state for the final approval. The state's review, the final stage of the state's review is the adopted housing element, making sure that the city actually adopts something that they have previously commented on and reviewed based on the revisions that we've provided. So with that, I conclude my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Is there any comments? Is there any questions? Council? Yes, sir. Councilmember Linus.
Thank you for the presentation. I was actually at one of the community meetings where we went over the housing elements. I really appreciate it. Say the council were to adopt this housing element today, it gets sent over to HCD, gets reviewed. It may come back with some corrections, correct? So,
I don't expect any, but because when we submitted the draft for them the final draft for them to do a preliminary informal review, and they came back and said everything is fine. Now, with that, they always leave a little door open and say they may come back for some corrections. I think the resolution that we have provided is in the event those kind of technical corrections comes back, staff can take the lead to make those technical corrections. I don't anticipate that they're coming back with policy changes, but if they do, then we certainly would bring it back to the city council. But however, I really don't expect that.
Right, and I think you answered my question because, in the event that it does come back, if it doesn't affect any of our policies,
Right.
then staff has the latitude to move that forward.
Yeah.
But if it does and it comes back to the city council, and, I understand that there are certain things that the state wants us to kind of abide by and go with, right? And one of those is the RENA goals, right? They're goals, they're not obligations, right? But I guess I just want to make sure that with this housing element, there's still a strong degree of local control that we have, right?
Right.
In the event that there's any projects that we're maybe looking to implement or a certain vision that the city has.
Correct. I think part of that is that we have identified more capacity than we need for the RENA. It's based on your land use policy. We're not proposing changes to what you have already seen.
Okay.
But in the event that you want to do some, there are certain changes, you just need to make sure that whatever changes would not jeopardize your ability to meet the RENA.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, again, we kind of have local control and we're not necessarily looking at this as an impediment, right? But more as kind of like something to help enable us and supplement us and support us. So.
Correct. In fact, having a certified housing element allows you to keep your local control. If you don't have a certified housing element, you may lose that local control.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, council member. Great question. I'm just going to follow up on your presentation. Can we go back one slide here? The The recommendation by DTSC, what exactly do they mean here? Recommends connecting for future projects that may fall under DTSC's oversight.
I think also because of the city's development, historical past of a lot of industrial uses, you may have properties that have toxic substance, underground. But the housing element is a policy document, and they cannot conclude at this time, looking at the housing element, whether there'll be any particular properties that may be impacted by that. And so what they're saying is, in the future, when you have projects, make sure that you connect with them and make sure you comply with the requirements for toxic substance.
Okay, I'm clear. Thank you. That was primarily it, and thank you for clarifying the previous questions related to the RENA numbers. And under the current or the presentation that we have here, I believe it's a total of 247 units in different categories, of course, as you've outlined. So, okay, thank you. We appreciate your presentation. I don't believe we have any additional comments or questions. And did you have a question?
Those are the same questions that Councilmember Lainez said, but I just like to confirm there's no changes in the housing policy. What'd you say?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
No changes to the housing policies that we have.
These comments are not resulting in any policy changes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I believe that concludes our comments, questions. Staff, is there any follow-up to the presentation that was just made, or that's all we're going to be having?
Not at this time, no.
No, Mayor, in the event there are some corrections, those will be communicated to the city council.
Pardon me?
In the event there are some corrections from HCD, then those will be communicated to city council.
Okay, and at this time, we're going to open the public hearing on the subject matter. Anyone wishing to address the city council on this item or any other item, or actually on this item only, may do so at this time. Okay. Seeing none, we're going to close the public hearing at this time. And we'll move to item number 3 to approve the resolution adopting the 2021-2029 housing element update and the negative declaration pursuant to Public Resources Code Section 21080C. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any objections? Lena, do you need a roll call on this?
There's a little.
Let's do roll call.
Councilmember Garcia?
Yes.
Councilmember Lainez?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Tamirano?
Yes.
And Mayor Guimeda?
Yes. Motion passes. Wow. Okay. And it looks like this takes us to the end of our agenda here. All right. I'm going to move to City Council reports, please. I'll start to my right. Councilmember Garcia.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended the fall conference at the Contract Cities and Professional Development. That was a wonderful conference to attend. I also attended today the street dedication to, oh my gosh, his name, Haig Papayan. The person that was a respected individual here in the City of Commerce, and my condolences to his family. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to my left, Councilmember Lainez.
Thank you, Mayor. Last week, I attended the Gateway Cities annual retreat, where we had sessions where we talked about transportation, housing, environment and sustainability, and health awareness. And for those who don't know, the Gateway Cities Council of Governments, it's a coalition of 27 different cities. And what this Council of Governments does is they're basically a board that advocates what those 27 cities, funding or projects, what they should go for, but it really just advocates for them at a state and a federal level. And there are a couple of programs that I learned of in that retreat that would be beneficial to commerce. One of those is the Empower Gateway. Along the 710 corridor, There have been 11 communities that have been identified as communities of focus, communities of need, and SoCal Edison and SoCal Ren have created a program called Empower Gateway, where they're providing subsidies for pre-owned zero-emission vehicles, electrical panel upgrades for home EV charging, home appliance retrofits, so on and so forth. So I'll get that information put together and I'll send it over to staff, and maybe we can socialize it to the community once the time is right, because I think that's something that would be beneficial. So I did want to bring that to light. I also attended the Contract Cities Fall Seminar this past weekend, and there were a lot of great informational sessions, but one in particular that I thought was really interesting was a panel led by Supervisors Horvath and our supervisor, Janice Hahn, talking about Measure A, which will be on the ballot this upcoming November. And it's a measure that relates to housing and, a quarter-cent sales tax, right, which is a little bit different than what we had with Measure H, which I believe was a half-cent sales tax. That tax went to the county, and we really didn't know what was going on with those funds. They weren't really coming back to our cities. But with this measure, there's a little bit more transparency. That money should be coming back to the cities, and the cities can actually decide what they do with that money to address, housing and homelessness and things of that nature here in our cities. And it would also repeal Measure H, which would basically make a half cent available to be taxed. So, that's something that I'm sure we'll be discussing as an administration and as a body here, because, I think it frees up some money that we could potentially use to help with some of our resources. On top of that, I also attended the Hague Papayan Jr. street dedication ceremony earlier today, and I do want to thank city staff for putting together such a wonderful ceremony. As we all know, it was really warm out there today, and just the setup was really elaborate and it was great. And I just want to thank everybody who participated in that. And I mentioned this earlier at the ceremony. I didn't know Hague personally, but I do know the impact that he's had on our communities and our families. And the casino has been an amazing community partner here in the City of Commerce. And I know my family, my children have benefited from the things that they've done to support our library services and, just the revenue that they bring over to the city and how it supports parks and just everything that we do. So, as a person who came into the City of Commerce about 12 years ago, I realized that community partnerships like the casino are so important. So I'll always support the casino and what they do because of what they do for our families. They're very supportive of what we do. They don't have to. There's some businesses in our community that aren't necessarily as supportive. So I think sometimes that can be taken for granted. So, rest in peace to Hague. I think dedicating a street to him is fitting because, we want his legacy to live on in the city for as long as it can. That concludes my report, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Linus. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I also attended Contract Cities with some of my colleagues. They did have some pretty good seminars there, but the one that I saw that mostly impacted me was the mental health one, the way they were talking about that after COVID, there's just a lot more mental health things that are going on. And they spoke into the social media. A lot of the people there spoke about being attacked on social media, how much it affects somebody, just creating the stress, a little bit of stress in your life, and it starts to build up. We just need to, really check in with ourselves. And they were talking about somehow like in the morning, just create some sort of like invisible bubble and don't allow that stuff to really get into your head, right? And live in your head. Otherwise, it just makes you sick. But I also attended the Hague Papayan ceremony today, and I didn't get to speak there. However, Hague Papayan was a tough guy. I mean, that guy, he was a serious man. Made things happen for not only the casino but for our community as well. And he was just such a gentle giant. He was such a just giver, and I appreciate everything that not only Hague Papayan but the casino, what they do for our community, how much they give to our community. And yes, they're the giant. They're also, it's a reflection of Hague Papayan. The casino's the giant of the community, of the city that provides close to half of our revenue here in our general fund. So it's we can't lose them. And I'll also leave it to the mayor to give an update on things that's taking place with the Assembly and the Senate in regards to the casinos in California. But so that's the end of my report.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Appreciate your comments. Yeah, I too was at the services for Hague Battalion. Thank you, all of our staff that was there, and the great job you all did. Councilmember Linus already outlined that. You guys did a phenomenal job at putting that event together over there. I was actually wondering, because I'm familiar with the site there, and it's just a vacant spot over there, and you guys made it look great, very presentable for everybody was there, and also the shading that you guys provided for many that were there, because it was right out in the open. So appreciate all the great work you guys did in putting that whole thing together. It was just good to be there for somebody that has done so much for the commerce community and for the Commerce Casino. I've had the pleasure, I believe in his, what I read, he came to the Commerce Casino back in November of 1990, or in 1996, and I was elected, to the city council in November of 1986, and so I've had the pleasure of working with him for many, many years. There's been many things that he's done for the community, and I know each of you can probably name different things, but the things that stick to my mind was the scholarship program. He was instrumental in increasing the amount of money that was donated. Initially, I had met with Mr. George Tumajian, who was a former president and CEO, and he had asked me, what do you recommend as a gift for the city birthday? And I didn't know. I was like, the first time being mayor, and I was like, wasn't sure what to respond to him. But what came to mind was the scholarship program. And I said, the best gift that you can give this city is to invest in its future. And he looked at me like not sure what I was talking about. And my response was, we have a great scholarship program. If you donate to it, you will be investing in the city's future. And so that was the beginning of their first donation. And I believe the following year, through Hague's involvement, I believe that then it was 38 years, I think, on our anniversary, or 39, I think it was, and they started with $39,000 that they donated to the scholarship program, and then they increased it every year after that, and they capped it at $50,000. So we've been receiving, a lot of donations to our scholarship program, and it really has done a lot of good for many here in our community. So we're very fortunate, but that's just one example. The other example was the senior program. I remember sitting with Mr. Papayan at the Commerce Casino, at the restaurant, and we were talking, and I was telling him that we should probably do this. And part of the reason that we suggested it is because of some of the issues going on with the gaming industry. And I says, look, we need to connect more with the community so that when we ask for their support, it'll make it easier. And wow. It's interesting, but looking forward, it's very true. I mean, it's worked out great, but that's how the senior breakfast came about. That's how we came up with that. And today, right now, we're waiting for the governor. Potentially, he may be signing that bill that we were working so hard not to get passed through the Assembly and through the Senate. It made it through both. So it's now up to the governor. He's either going to sign it or he's going to veto that bill. It's Senate Bill SB 549, and we're hoping that he vetoes it, but we'll see how that goes. It's my understanding that the Commerce Casino, through a lot of their work over there and some of the work that we've done here through the city as well, they've turned in over 10,000 signatures to the governor. And we did have a meeting this afternoon, just to let you guys know. We had a meeting this afternoon, and we had a meeting with the representatives from the governor's office, so they were hearing our arguments related to SB 549 and why they should veto the bill. But I definitely know that it's gotten his attention based on the number of letters that he's received, and hopefully we'll get a hopefully it'll get vetoed. I hope it doesn't get signed. But if it doesn't, then we go back to the drawing board on what our options are and what we need to do next in order to move forward with this, and how we're going to move forward. But obviously, the impacts could be pretty significant to not only the City of Commerce, but to all of the card clubs in the state of California. So, and there's over 80 card clubs in the state of California, so the impacts could be pretty significant. What it'll do if this legislation is signed by the governor, it'll allow the tribes to actually challenge the different games that are being played in the different card clubs throughout the state, and it'll allow them to file lawsuits and basically go to court and challenge that they're not playing these games legally, that they are the only ones that are allowed to play these games. So obviously, depending on how this moves forward, it could potentially have a very negative impact on all the card clubs in the state of California. So stay tuned, and we'll be letting you all know exactly what transpires. As soon as we find out, we'll let you all know, and the potential impacts. But we're not. Hopefully, we'll let you know as soon as we find out what happens. If the governor signs it, then obviously, then they now have the right to file lawsuits, and more than likely, you're going to see a lot of these card clubs going through the courts and spending a lot of the resources and money and fighting this in the courts, and we'll see where things go. But anyways, that is it. I don't have anything else to report at this time other than ongoing meetings related to SB 549, because we've been having lots of meetings related to that, and as soon as we find out more, we'll provide more information to everybody. Thank you for all of you who have helped and participated in sending in your letters. I know several of you have completed those letters and those have been submitted as well. Thank you. And when we adjourn, we'll be adjourning our meeting in memory of Sandra Vanessa Perez Espinosa, who is a co-owner of El Saggio restaurant. It's our understanding that she passed away, and she came down with cancer, and she lost her life to the illness. Our sincere condolences to her family, and we wish all of them well during this difficult time. Thank you, and we are now adjourned. Thank you.